minute and a half early. Whatever.
Yep, it just said live now.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
I'm seeing that there's already people in the chat. Tracy's here.
How goes?
Tom
Hi,
Hunter
Tracy.
Jerk is here. Daryl's here. So
Yeah,
hello, everyone.
I warned him you're going to find something.
Good, thank you.
Him.
I feel bad because I was like advertising it on my community page, but at the same time, I'm doing this thing where I'm trying to do a trivia question every single day. So I was worried that the wires were going to get crossed.
No, I texted him.
Okay, so today's subject matter is 80s cult classic movies. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and get started, so even though we're a little early. And we have Thrash over there, and Lance down there. So make sure you say hi in the chat. Let's see. Okay, so when it comes to cult classics, the first thing you got to do is you got to define it, right? And I spent way too much time thinking about this. Like, how do you define a cult classic? I came up with three criteria. The first is that it wasn't successful with mainstream audiences, which either means it was a box office disappointment or it didn't even get distributed because it's an indie movie or studios just didn't want it, that kind of stuff. Two, it had to have found a devoted audience nonetheless. That could mean almost anything. Like, that's really subjective, but I think you could like look to things like magazines and fan clubs and maybe even like home video sales, that kind of thing. And the third and last thing is that it is still talked about today in places that aren't too hard to find. Like, you don't have to like go scouring the dark web to find people talking about it. Like, people will talk about it. Or it's doing really well in video sales to this day, or midnight movie screenings, that kind of thing. So that's how I'm going to define a cult classic. Now, not all the movies we talk about are going to fit all three of those criteria. It doesn't matter. Like I said, I was just thinking too much about it, and I had to share my thoughts. So I've also come up with a list, and we'll just talk about whatever movie pops in our head or whatever movie pops up in the chat. So if you can think of any 80s sci-fi, or not sci-fi, but 80s cult classics, it doesn't even have to be sci-fi. Any 80s cult classic, we're here for it. Okay? So I'm not going to start, though. I'm going to make Thrash start. So Thrash, name me an 80s cult classic.
Well, it's funny you should start with me, because I was actually talking to Mrs. Thrash right before we started the show today. And I'm so glad you mentioned that thing about science fiction, because while possibly 50% of my cult list is science fiction, there were a lot of really good movies that have cult status that aren't science fiction. A lot are high fantasy, which, granted, that's a crossover, but they're not science fiction. And I'm going to start with, my wife said, what's your favorite all-time cult film? And I'm like, that's a toughie. And she thought I was going to say something like Night of the Living Dead or something like that, or Blade Runner, which is certainly up there. But I'm going to open with Excalibur.
Oh, good one.
Because when I was a kid, it's an absolutely amazing film. It actually, one of the other things about cult films, oftentimes they don't have particularly great production value. The acting is inconsistent. Oftentimes they sort of skimp on the special effects. Excalibur did not have that. Excalibur was actually a very, very well-made movie. Boorman actually wanted to do Lord of the Rings, but he couldn't get the rights to it.
Right.
So he decided he was going to go ahead and do another high fantasy sword and sorcery movie. And the effects are great. The cast is phenomenal. The acting gets a little hokey, or should I say melodramatic, but it's great. The thing was, it was very, very, very poorly merchandised here in the States. A lot of people didn't even hear about it. So it bombed here. But like some of the other things, it was the platforms that sort of resurrected it. HBO used to show it routinely. Later on, it found a huge following in the video rental market. And that sort of created a renaissance, a medieval renaissance of Excalibur, as you will. And as I'm sure all of you know, I've left strict instructions with my wife. At my funeral, at least one person has to say, "Are you just a dream, Thrash?" where I will respond. A dream to some, a nightmare to others. And so I'm going to open with Excalibur because, and still talking about to this day, there's a ton of chats on YouTube about Excalibur, even to this day. I was actually having a chat not too long ago with one of the guys who played the Knights.
Oh, really?
He was like a professional horseback rider, and they said, "Could you ride in armor?" And he's like, "I think so." Yeah.
Nice.
And I was like dressing up in armor and having to ride. And he goes, "It's tricky at first, but yeah, he was a professional horseman. Foreman hired him to be one of the mounted knights in that opening segment."
Yeah, I didn't even see Excalibur until, I don't know, the late 90s probably, because it didn't enter my radar. Like you said, here in the States, it just wasn't a big deal here. Like, not a lot of people knew about it. But yeah, it's definitely still talked about. I mean, RNG even had a watch along on our channel just a few weeks ago, right?
That was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. I just want to say hi to a couple other people who've jumped into the chat. Zooper's here, being contrarian as always. Let's see. Baked Bean is here. Hello.
Hey.
Let's see. Sean Ennis is here.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, how's it going, Sean?
John is here. I'm going to call him John because I don't know how to pronounce his screen name. GR is here, who saw Excalibur in the theater, apparently, which is cool. My good friend Spodes is here. Danny Staten is here, of course.
Danny.
I think that's about everybody. Zuper talks about Tremors. Tremors was 1990. We'll count it because whatever. We don't have any rules. Definitely a good cult classic. It's really hard. My brain just wants me to keep saying sci-fi classic because that's just what I do on my channel all the time. So when I try to say cult classic, it might come out as sci-fi classic. I don't mean it that way. It doesn't have to be sci-fi. I swear.
I have one.
Okay, go for it, Lance.
How about Risky Business?
Risky Business. That's a good one. That's the one with Tom Cruise and Rebecca De Mornay. Yeah. It's classic. Everybody knows that. At least everybody knows that scene of Tom Cruise like sliding into the frame in his underwear. But for kids my age, when they saw Risky Business, they mostly remember the subway scene with Rebecca De Mornay. So
in the air tonight. In the
air tonight. Yeah.
The hottest subway scene ever.
I always wondered why Leonard Cohen was so miserable in the last years of his life. He had armies of devoted fans, and he was married to Rebecca Romijn. How can you not be happy in life?
I actually have his autobiography. I haven't read it yet. Maybe I'll get some insight. But
Can't hurt.
I don't like Leonard Cohen is interesting to me because a lot of his music sounds depressing and down, but if you actually listen to the lyrics, they're pretty optimistic. Which is it's a weird paradox of his music, and I really appreciate that.
In Risky Business, Tom Cruise was going after that egg that girl stole. Remember that? That Beverly J egg on the fireplace?
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
He had to buy back all his stuff. That's furniture he got stolen. He had to buy it all back from the pimp.
Guido, the killer pimp.
Guido, the killer pimp. Yep.
Remember the scene where he says, "Are you ready for your Ralph?"
By the way, I just want to, he's not here in the chat as far as I know, but I do want to give a shout out to Uncle Joe, who has allowed me to piggyback on his StreamYard account. So but that's why I don't have to have that StreamYard watermark on the corner. So if Joe's around, thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
And that's also why some of the comments are kind of like
I love the computer artwork he's been putting up.
Oh yeah, he's great. Yeah, he's my graphics guy. But he's very, very busy. It's amazing that he's able to do that every single day. Like, I'm really impressed because he's got a really hard job and he's constantly working. And he's he's a family man too, so he's got a lot on his plate. So it's always impressive. John has some more requisites for cult classics. Things like nudity, violence, sex, and gore are all pretty common, at least. Yes, Zuper. Tron was in the 80s, and
Yes.
it wasn't financially
82,
successful.
I want to say.
Yeah, I think you're right. 82. Yeah, I think it qualifies as a cult classic because it's obviously still around today. They're making a third one, with Jared Leto, unfortunately.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's the only downside. But I'm still excited because I love Tron. But I'm going to go ahead and list one off of my list, and one I just recently rewatched for the purposes of this live stream, and that is Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh yeah,
That movie is wild. I watched it when I was a kid, and I remember loving it and thinking, even as a kid, I thought it was weird. And rewatching it again now as an adult, it's chaos. It's chaos on screen, and I love it. It's like randomness of the movie, and for that reason I think I love it. It's like every scene has a backstory you're not being told. Like you have to kind of just go with it, and the plot will make sense if you just let it wash over you. There's a lot of Peter Weller movies like that. I mean, you go to Cronenberg and Naked Lunch, or Screamers, another cult classic, but I think that was from the 90s. A lot of his movies are just more about feeling and attitude than about like coherent narrative. And Buckaroo Banzai, don't get me wrong, it does have a coherent plot and it does have a story, but at the same time, it just feels like there's a lot going on that you're not privy to, and the tone is kind of, you're not really sure how jokey it's meant to be or how serious it's meant to be. It's obviously more jokey than serious, but there's a lot of weirdness to it, and that's one of the reasons I think it's a cult classic. It never really found its audience in its day because people just didn't know what to make of it. But it's still a cult classic. People still talk about it today. It's got an amazing cast. You know, John Lithgow, Christopher Lloyd as Big Booty. Peter Weller, obviously, Jeff Goldblum in a cowboy outfit for some reason,
and Clancy Brown.
Clancy Brown, right, Mr. Krabs himself, yeah. I just love that movie. It's so good and so bizarre.
Yeah.
So when I think of cult classics from the 80s, that's usually the first movie that pops in my brain.
Well, it was just the
everywhere you go, there you are.
Yeah, everywhere you go, there you are. Right.
Amount of blend of actual vintage sci-fi.
Uh-oh.
Now you're freezing up. Sorry, Thrash.
Thrash freezing up.
Well, we all are. I keep losing your picture, Rebecca.
My picture or
we
Lance's
keep
picture?
blinking in and out.
Okay, guys, is it me?
Is your equipment holding up there?
Let me check my. Yeah, let me check.
I think it might be your signal.
Maybe. I mean, the way StreamYard works is like we're each uploading to StreamYard, and StreamYard is putting it out into the internet. So I don't know if just my connection would be enough to set it off. I've got decent connection speed, so it's probably not me. Anyway, technical issues, par for the course. We all know how this works.
Should we press on?
Yeah. I think we should try to press on.
And Thrash knows it well.
Yeah. So why don't you try again, Thrash? Say what you wanted to say about Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh, just that it was the perfect blend of actual vintage sci-fi and 80s non sequitur humor. Somehow they managed to reconcile those two. And it's certainly a farce, but I thought it was a very well done farce.
No, that's very well put.
And Darrell says he didn't see any problems.
Yeah, and neither does Sean. Sean says everything's fine on his end. So I don't know. We're seeing issues, but you guys aren't, so that's fine.
That's a good thing.
What was I thinking? You were the vintage sci-fi aspect of Buckaroo Banzai. I forgot to mention that, but you're right. Like it does feel like a throwback to like 50s sci-fi. The whole like the science fiction element of it is just it's basically just rote. Like it's not meant to be taken at all seriously. It's he's hopping through dimensions and finding aliens, and it doesn't really make sense if you think about it. Like why are they in space if they're dimensional aliens? But whatever. It's just fun, and yeah. I don't know what else I was going with that, but
Hey, Tug.
Yeah.
How come they never got a sequel?
Because it did terribly at the box office, and critics didn't like it. That's pretty much it. That's why it never got a sequel. I mean, we were supposed to see that because, like, at the end, it's like Buckaroo Banzai versus the Crime League or something.
The World Crime League
sequel, right.
I would love that.
So I think it's your turn, Thrash. Give us another one.
Another one. Okay, I'm going to stick with avoiding science fiction and just sort of play off yours. So I'm going to go to my next cult film, Raising Arizona. Which
yes.
I absolutely love this movie.
Nick Cage.
Yeah, he's great in it. And it's so funny because it's done in this sort of very low brow setting, but the humor is so intelligent that when you watch for it, I mean, it's working on so many different levels. And John Goodman as the escape con, who's got his own machinations, and the fact that Nicolas Cage is spending the entire movie trying to go straight, but everything he does just leads him into more crime. And even though speaking of farces, it's an incredible farce, but it's all so believable. Because the way things transpire, you're like, yeah, it starts off innocently enough and just sort of devolves, almost like one of those old noir films. Where
right.
You get this little mistake which causes a ripple, so you make a bigger one and a bigger one and a bigger, and then somehow the whole thing ends up having a happy ending. So I love the Coen Brothers as a rule, and at least I can think of another half dozen movies they've done that should be on this list. In fact, I think a couple of them are. But regardless, I had to do Raising Arizona just because it's just such a fun film. Oh, and by the way, the closing credits. They do Beethoven's Ninth on banjos.
Oh, right. Forgot about that.
And I'm like, how many people watch this movie are going to catch that? So that alone was worth watching the film.
The Coen Brothers, you mentioned film noir. A lot of Coen Brothers movies they take the format of a film noir and just plug it into other genres. Like
Fargo.
Yeah, Fargo is a film noir in a certain way. Big Lebowski, definitely a film noir. But it's a comedy, and
Miller's Crossing.
I love the Coen Brothers. Yeah, the Coen Brothers, I think when they started their career with things like Blood Simple, they really were trying to make film noir movies, like modern film noir. But they realized that wasn't quite working for them, so they found other ways to do it, and they inserted their own humor, which is so dry and so perfect and so beautiful. I freaking love the Coen Brothers. I love everything they do. They can do no wrong. And Raising Arizona, I saw when I was way too young to see it. I was like 9 or something, and I saw it in the theater. And all I remembered back then was John Goodman blowing up. That's all I really remembered back then. But I remembered liking the movie, thinking it was a lot of fun, even though I was way too young to be seeing it. And then when I became an adult and I watched it again, I'm like, wow, there's so much more to this movie than I thought.
Hey, Tug.
Yeah.
The only movie I've seen that I didn't love is good.
Yeah.
Good. The only one that I didn't love is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? For some reason, I did not, and I wanted to love that because it's a reverse of the Odyssey. For some reason, it just didn't land. I'm not sure what it was missing, but it was missing something. Just me.
I remember the part in Arizona where he said, "I'll take the Pampers and anything else you
have." Yeah, Thrash is frozen again, at least on our end. The comments have been littered with good cult movies, so I'm going to go ahead and list a few of them. Scarface. That was yeah. Let's see. Ruthless People. I freaking love Ruthless People. This must be the stupidest man on the face of the earth. I love this movie. Full Metal Jacket. But I think when you're talking about Stanley Kubrick, I mean, Stanley Kubrick has a cult following. Just Stanley Kubrick himself has a cult following. And I consider myself part of that cult. But so yeah, any Stanley Kubrick movie would probably do, because a lot of his movies didn't actually make a lot of money. Like, they were usually successful, but only slightly successful. Like movies like Strangelove, which, you know, are beloved by film geeks the world over, only made like a little bit of a profit, you know. And 2001 only made a profit in the very end because of a bunch of people on acid discovered it, you know. It was the 60s. Elvira, yeah. Summer and Ski School, yeah.
Oh yeah, Summer School.
Yeah. Sean Ennis does list a couple other Coen Brothers movies. Intolerable Cruelty and Hail Caesar, which he's right. I wasn't too crazy about either of those either. Hail Caesar had some moments, but it needed work. It needed another.
How about Romancing the Stone?
Oh yeah, Romancing the Stone. My mother loves that movie. And its sequel, Jewel of the Nile. Yeah.
I love that song in that movie. When they go and get stuff, the stuff get going.
Between that and Peter Pan, when I was a kid, I always had an irrational fear that I was going to have my hand eaten by an alligator. Which, you know, I lived in Florida, so it wasn't outside the realm of possibility.
Well, speaking of alligators, how about Lake Placid? I know that's a little one, but I love that movie.
I also love Lake Placid. It's not 80s, it's 90s, but you know, how can you not like
Betty White?
Betty White. She's so good in that.
Feeding the people to the crocodiles.
Oh, you're right, Zuper. Spartacus was one of the exceptions. Stanley Kubrick made a lot of money on Spartacus.
Although I think his number one money-making film was Lolita, because of all the notoriety behind it.
That's probably true. Yeah. I have to look it up, but you're probably right. Although I do think The Shining made a lot of money too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Jeremy Irons, yeah.
The Last Starfighter, awesome.
I have, yep. Got that on DVD.
I have a video of it here on this channel.
The Monster Squad.
Okay, Danny Staten. Nobody likes a smart ass. Okay,
I got one.
Go ahead, Lance. Yeah, it's your turn.
How about Chud?
Chud. Wow, I've actually never seen it. I'm familiar with it, and I'm definitely familiar with the cover from the video rental store. But yeah, I never actually saw it.
Wow, you got to watch it. It's pretty. It's cheesy, but it's fun.
Okay,
you'll have to turn in your geek card.
I have some holes in it. I don't deny it. My geek knowledge is not unlimited.
Hey, Thrash, what's that stand for?
Yes, sir.
Cannibalistic
humanoid underground dwellers.
I think I knew that, but I would have had to have really searched my brain.
But what's the other
the other one?
Contamination hazardous. Yeah.
Yeah. But actually, it was city something urban development. It was the Crooked Developmenters. Yes, city something urban
city
development
housing or something.
It was something like that. Yeah. I knew it too until you asked me. Oh, but don't want you to too, bud.
Oh no.
Okay. I didn't even know there was a Chud too. So.
How about American Ninja?
American Ninja, that's a good one.
American Ninja.
Nothing wrong with that.
Oh, Sean Ennis mentioned The Keep and Vision Quest. Both are great, but I particularly love The Keep. I love cult films set during World War II. And The Keep is a rare. It's sci-fi horror, but set during World War II, and I think that's a classic. And Vision Quest is great as well.
Oh, Vision Quest, yep.
I know Vision Quest.
So,
The
Tug, your
Keep
turn.
sounds great, but I don't even know it. Oh, is it my turn? Wow.
Yeah, the Keep.
Let's see what else.
Yeah.
Go ahead. The Keep.
Oh, the Keep. Frank Finlay plays a Jewish professor of folklore and black magic, that type of thing, and he's captured by the Germans, and he manages. They take him to this castle where there's some shenanigans going on, and he realizes that there's this entity that if he releases it, he might be able to manipulate it to counterattack the Nazis. It's sort of Gollum meets I don't know what was that other movie? It's Gollum meets another movie.
Right.
And the problem is the entity that he's trying to release might just be more evil than the Nazis that they're fighting. Oh, duh! It just dawned on me: the devil is not mocked,
Gotcha.
which actually was never made into a feature film. Although I really think it should have been. But it's a short story. It's a very good one. They did do a depiction of it in Night Gallery many years ago, so you can see it on screen. Well, on a small screen.
How about the Warriors?
Well, yeah, the Warriors definitely.
Yeah, I was going to say that in fact, haven't we talked about the Warriors? Because one of the things I was trying to do is I was trying to avoid movies we already talked about. I thought we talked about the Warriors in one of our.
I'm not sure if we talked about it on this channel or on Ian's channel, but we've definitely talked about the Warriors.
Come out to play.
Yeah. But Sean Ennis brings up a good point. Most John Carpenter movies qualify as cult classics because almost none of them.
Have
made
you
a lot
guys
of money.
seen my video on the Warriors?
No, I have not.
Well, I'll check that out.
Halloween. Danny was telling me Halloween, I guess, made like surprising money.
Well, yeah, Halloween made a ton of money.
But yeah, check out. I have a video on.
Okay, yeah, I'll check it out. But other John Carpenter films, like The Thing, is obviously on my list because it's The Thing.
Yep.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Got all three.
But he's got others from the 80s, like In the Mouth of Madness, and Christine doesn't count because Christine was a financial success. The Fog. There's too many. They Live, which I've talked about at length on this channel. Escape from New York. Yeah. That also didn't make a lot
Big
of money.
Trouble.
Big Trouble in Little China, obviously.
They Live.
So many. Like, there's just so many John Carpenter movies. This whole list could be John Carpenter movies.
Yeah.
I could talk about each one of those movies all day. Like, honestly, I could.
How about the one called the Ghost of Mars?
Oh, yeah, The Ghosts of Mars. Like, I hadn't actually seen that until I got married. And my wife had a copy of it, and she's like, this is the best movie ever. Which I was very skeptical because it looked like cheese. And it is cheese, but it's wonderful cheese, and I love it. It's such a great movie for being so terrible. Let's see. Not The Taking of Pelham. The Assault on Precinct 13. I think that was the 70s. That was before Halloween, I think.
Where they killed the kid. Remember that scene?
I do remember that
scene. Truck. Kim Richards.
Yeah. It was Kim Richards. Very good. It was Kim Richards. Yes, who was like 12 at the time, or 13.
13. Weird.
Oh, Swamp Thing.
Love Swamp Thing.
Yes.
Also,
how about Return
Adrian
to Swamp
Barbeau.
Thing?
Yeah, Adrian Barbeau, since we're talking about John Carpenter.
How about part 2? Swamp Thing, Return to Swamp Thing.
I have seen, yeah, I remember it. Yeah. The first one
I don't recall it.
Will always hold a special place in my heart because, apparently Thrash hasn't seen the sequel.
Well, I don't recall it. I think I saw it years ago, just have no recollection of it. Something like I have the same problem with They Still Call Me Bruce. I love They Call Me Bruce. If you put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you one scene out of They Still Call Me Bruce. Other than that's the tagline, They Still Call Me Bruce.
Well, John, this question, what's the gestating period between a box office run and its cult status? We don't actually have to answer that question since we're doing 80s movies. The gestation period is definitely over. So thankfully, don't have to worry about it.
Hey, Thresh, what about your film?
Although,
Not in the comment.
you want to? Now I know we've talked about that one before, but I've always willing to talk about it more. Yes, that is my favorite holiday movie of all time, as you know. And I will defend its holiday status to the day I die. And of course, as we've talked about, Joss Whedon has actually fessed up with the fact that when he was conceptualizing Buffy the Vampire Slayer, he used Sam as sort of the cheerleader vampire hunter shtick.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Kelly Maroney.
In her case, zombie more than vampires. So, just yes. But the movie just works on so many levels. And you know what the funniest thing about it is? Do you know why that movie bombed so badly in the box office? Because I was actually in high school when it came out. The marketing to that movie was all over the place. Nobody knew what the premise was. I mean, we knew it was a post-apocalyptic, but the way when I saw the commercials for it, to me, I thought it was like a Lord of the Flies situation where somehow all the adults are dead and the only thing left are teenagers. Sort of the Girl Who Owned a City type situation.
Right.
And it wasn't. It just happened that the two main characters are both teenagers. And they say like the poster for it. People went to the theater and say, "Oh, what's this?" I don't know. It's some woman standing in front of a very highly lit door. You know, it didn't try to land the point. If they had said it was a sort of teen-friendly Omega Man, I think a lot more people would have gone to see it. But again, it was rediscovered with that sort of home theater boom because every rental store I ever went into had that movie available on its cult cinema shelf.
I think that's like a common theme with movies that are considered cult classics today, is that they were just poorly marketed, which is why they didn't do well. Like sometimes the marketing team behind a movie doesn't know what to make of the movie and doesn't know how to market it, so they throw something together that doesn't actually work or make sense. Like, so people get the wrong impression of what the movie is. They go to see it, they don't like it, and the movie just tanks. I think that happens a lot more often than. Well, yeah, I just think that happens a lot. But there are other instances where things like The Thing, it was marketed correctly. Like, it was marketed as a horror movie, and it was a horror movie. The problem was it came out the same time as E.T., and people were more interested in the lighthearted E.T. than they were the dark and paranoid vision of The Thing. So that happens too. It just comes out at the wrong time.
There were a lot of movies that bombed because there was a different movie that was its competition.
Yeah, that happens a lot too.
Sometimes the audiences pick the wrong movie.
Although E.T. is still a great movie. I will still defend E.T. until the day I die. I wouldn't say it's the wrong choice. But The Thing is The Thing.
But there have been cases.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of other movies being mentioned that I think are really good. But Baked Bean mentions Halloween 4, which I wanted to...
Yep.
I just wanted to highlight that because I love Halloween 4. I'm going to say the original Halloween is probably the best. Halloween 4 might be my favorite of all the Halloween movies.
Really?
There's just something about it that I love. It's very 80s. It's very 80s slasher. And yet I don't think it was all that successful. I think it was successful, but not like terribly successful. And Halloween struggled after that with 5 and 6.
Well, 3 is what killed it. 3 just completely derailed it. And the really funny thing is Halloween 3 wasn't a particularly bad movie. It probably would have been a fun cult film if it hadn't been called Halloween 3.
Exactly. And I do think that Halloween 3 would also qualify as a cult classic because it's been reevaluated. And I think a lot of people have seen it for what it was trying to be and like it. It definitely feels like a cult movie because it is kind of out there and bizarre. I mean, the whole thing has to do with Stonehenge and all that stuff and androids for some reason. It's great. I love Halloween 3. But yeah, you're right. The fact that they called it Halloween and they suddenly started saying that they were trying to do an anthology series with the Halloween, but if they were doing that, they shouldn't have made Halloween 2 first, because that everybody expects Michael Myers, so nobody went to go see it, and it bombed at the box office. and that residually hurt Halloween 4, even though Halloween 4 was marketed as the return of Michael Myers. That's what it's called.
I'll be right back.
People were still, not too happy about it. Okay, Lance, see you in a minute. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out because Halloween 4.
Oh no, I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. So.
And
I think
Predator.
Halloween
I don't know
4
if Predator
was hurt by
qualifies because I
Halloween 3.
think
Like, people were
Predator
like,
was successful. Yeah,
it was. It was.
you lucky jerk. Met the girls from Night of the Comet several years ago.
I'm trying to say something tacky, like there reminds me of a short story I wrote when I was in high school.
There's Uncle Joe.
We won't talk about that. This is actually here somewhere. Uncle Joe, have you cut the cake yet? Sorry.
Thank you
Hey, Joe,
again. Like I thanked you in the beginning of the video, but thank you again for letting me piggyback on your StreamYard account. Okay, instead of picking another one from the comments, I'm just going to go ahead and pick another one from my list. And I'm going to talk about Dune, 1984's Dune.
Please.
Because even though it's not a particularly good adaptation of Dune, I still really like it as a movie. And I know it has its problems. I know it has its flaws. I know there's people who don't like it. And when they tell me why they don't like it, I can agree with all their points. But there's just something about it that I just love. I love the visual aesthetic of it. I love that weird, gross David Lynch thing going on. You could put a lot of David Lynch movies on this list, but I think Dune, which was probably his most successful, weirdly enough, even though it was also a box office failure. I don't know. I don't know why I love it, but I do love it. So I think that qualifies. What do you think about 1984's Dune?
I can't agree with you more. One thing that was my advantage, I saw it with a couple of friends of mine who they had both read Dune already, and they were far more critical of it. I hadn't read Dune at that point in my life, so I could appreciate it as a sort of independent entity. And I loved it. I love what David Lynch did with it. I love how he made a very visual aesthetic for both houses, particularly the Harkonnen.
Yeah.
A lot of people say that he didn't get Baron right. Baron is more of this Machiavellian character, almost like the Kingpin. He's not the screaming Mimi, but I loved the screaming Mimi Baron Harkonnen. I thought it did work. The weirding way, I really wish he had kept that more as like a martial arts form than these silly sonic blaster things. But that's okay. The silly sonic blaster things I thought were a cool weapon. Of course, the whole premise of Dune is they don't use ranged weapons. Everything is hand to hand.
Yeah.
And he kind of went out the window with that. But again, when this movie came out literally around the same time, it was riding on the crest of the original Star Wars franchise. You have to have space marines with blasters shooting things. It's just what people expected at that time. So for what it was and for its time frame, I thought it was excellent. Now, granted, Sting sort of phoned his performance in. All right. And there were a few of the things which I thought could have been handled better. I thought that the giant sandworms, it's almost like Lynch didn't really understand how important they are in the book. So they were really just more like horses in a Western. But for what it was, I thought the Dune, 1984 Dune, was amazing. I probably like it better than the current franchise, if I had to choose. Even though the current franchise is far more accurate. 1984's Dune is just fun.
I will say the 1984 Dune is more fun, but I wouldn't go so far as to say I like it more than the current version because I really like the current version.
I really like it too. I'll tell you what, I have to reserve judgment until I see the end. I have to see how he wraps things up.
Although news did just break that he's trying to lobby WB to let him make a third part, which he'll adapt Dune Messiah, the second book. Which, please go for it.
Yes, please.
I will say you're right about one thing, and I do like the Baron Harkonnen from David Lynch's Dune more than I like the Stellan Skarsgård current version. As much as I love Stellan Skarsgård, and he can almost do no wrong in my book, and he is more accurate to the book for sure. There's just something about that Baron Harkonnen from the 1984 Dune. He definitely sticks with you more. He's more of a visceral thing. Yeah, I love him. And yeah, that gross stuff on his face, and I mean, apparently that is accurate to some of the extended novels and stuff. A lot of people complain about that, but it's not a problem. And David Lynch did admit he wasn't a huge fan of the book. Like, this wasn't like a Verhoeven Starship Trooper situation. He didn't hate it. He just wasn't like a huge fan. So he didn't feel like he had to adapt it too closely. And also, yeah, the studio was breathing down his neck for the next Star Wars. That's what they wanted. So yeah, I think with all those competing interests and all the things that could have gone disastrously wrong with that movie, the fact that it even came out and was coherent was a coup. So
a lot of people thought that the Jodorowsky debacle buried it. And it's a pity, because I think it would have been amazing. It's a pity if they could do the Jodorowsky concept on Netflix now and do it as a miniseries, I think it would work amazing, because they have the technology to do it now. I don't know if they have the budget, but they say that if Jodorowsky had made the movie that he was intending, it would have been 14 hours long.
Really long. You can't make a movie like that in late 1970s Hollywood. It's just not going to happen.
So they brought Lynch in as a sort of miracle worker with a Hail Mary play, and you're right. The fact that he was able to pull it off at all is a testament to his ability.
But there's an interesting like alternate universe out there where Jodorowsky actually managed to make the movie, and all that talent didn't go to waste. So
it was a beautiful vision. It was just
I would have loved to have seen. I would have sat down in a movie theater for 14 hours to watch that. But I know not a lot of other people would. Yeah, you'd probably need a break in there, at least like a meal break or a nap,
bathroom break.
Wow, I've been ignoring the comments for a while.
Hi.
Ooh, Superplex is on the warpath today.
He is,
dude.
Phantasm. That's a good one. Yep. That's a movie that like I didn't understand it growing up, but now like as I'm older, I like understand what the movie's really about. Just the first movie, not counting the sequels, which are also pretty cool in their own right. But the original movie is just about grief. That's all it is. It's just a movie about grief. And when you look at it that way, it's actually really like poignant in a way you would not expect from a movie about like a dimension hopping alien tall man and his killer ball that sucks all the blood out of your body. You know, like, I don't know. I just think it's a far more intelligent movie than it portrays itself as, because the movie you think it's just a cheesy horror movie from the 80s. You know, you think it's like a rental, but it's so much more than that. And that's something that really surprises me about Phantasm. I just had to say that.
Okay, I have to pick up Superplex Gauntlet. I have to. Are you really saying El Topo was a bad film? I seriously, Superplex. El Topo's actually on my list, by the way. You really hated El Topo. That movie had everything. And that's all I'm saying. Ooh, Scotty.
Scott, how's it going?
Scott.
Yeah, like I said, you could name almost any David Lynch movie and it would qualify as a cult classic, you know, all the way back to Eraserhead, you know. And yeah, Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, Lost Highway, you know, Mulholland Drive. Continues to this day. He's still making movies. He even made a Disney movie, weirdly enough. It was like I never saw it. But I remember it's
really
just like
Blue Velvet.
Oh, Blue Velvet, yeah. I would quote it, but I don't want to get demonetized.
I really like that.
Yes, Hopper in the video.
Here's to your.
Yeah. Maniac Cop. Yeah.
Good cast.
Yeah, it is. And in a similar vein, I have to mention Death Machines, which I only have to mention it just because one of my longtime Patreons used to be Paul Curiazzi, the director of Death Machines. He and I chatted a lot about that.
Hey, didn't it have Brad Dwarf in it?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it did. Absolutely. Oh, right. I forgot about that. David Lynch had originally been offered the chance to do Return of the Jedi, but didn't for one reason or another.
I think he was filming a different movie at the time.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
There's
a bell ringing in my head, but it's probably my tinnitus.
It was probably Elephant Man, which was the movie that got Hollywood's attention. That's why they gave him Dune, was because of Elephant Man. Which is weird because those two movies have almost nothing in common. Say again?
Anthony Hopkins was in Elephant Man.
That's right. Yep, and John Hurt was actually the titular Elephant Man, although you can't really tell.
Oh, yeah. Funny, John Hurt was good.
that's not a book you should force high school students to read. Or like, it's a great book and a must read for every sci-fi fan, but being forced to read it in high school, no. That'll make you hate it. Like,
I was out of college.
Yeah. You're not ready for Dune when you're in high school. like, even I wasn't ready for Dune in high school, and I was very precocious. I mean, I was already reading Atlas Shrugged in high school, but Dune would have been too much for me. And yeah, in high school, anytime they force you to read anything in high school, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth because this isn't something you chose to read. So a lot of the books that they made me read in high school, even though they were classics, even though I see their literary importance, I still kind of hate them just because they were forced on me, you know?
I'm with you.
Calvin Dodge agrees that the new Dune is better than the 1984 one. I definitely like, whether you like it more or less is not really the issue, but it's definitely the more competently made, without question.
Hands down.
Yeah. As much as I respect David Lynch as a director, he's not suited for big budget sci-fi. He can't do that.
But it ends as it's getting good. It ended.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. We haven't even seen Fade Rutha yet. How can you end a Dune segment without showing us Fade Rutha? I'm like,
that's true. Well, like you said, you have to reserve your judgment until you see the rest of it. Which unfortunately,
I will.
They couldn't do it like right back to back. They had to wait because WB was waiting on the profits to see if they could afford to do a second one, which is annoying. And yes, Jodorowsky's casting was insane. It had people like Orson Welles as the Emperor, and oh man, I don't even remember everybody who was in it, but it was a lot. And Pink Floyd was doing the soundtrack, and it would have been so. It would have been.
We talked about that. Sure. Yeah, it would have been. But Orson Welles as Emperor Shaddam IV, definitely.
Yeah, man.
Even in his advanced age. I mean, yeah, definitely. Oh, and I believe it was Calvin Dodge brought up the famous story about how they got Patrick Stewart, but they had actually wanted someone else.
Yeah.
And I'm trying, if I remember correctly, wasn't it Brian Blessed?
I think so. I think it was Brian Blessed. That rings a bell.
Patrick Stewart, he will not say the name of the person because it will embarrass him. But it was, but it was supposed to be. They go, that guy from that movie. Get me that guy from that movie, and everybody thought he was talking about Patrick Stewart, but he was talking about somebody else, and I believe it was Brian Blessed, who actually looks a lot more like the character of Gurney. Although one thing I will tell you is Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho. I loved Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho.
I was so surprised by him. Like, he was actually, when the cast list was named, he stood out to me as like the one really bad choice, but he turned out to be one of the best casting decisions in the entire movie. He's so good in it, and it's so weird to me. Because he's Jason Momoa. I didn't actually know he could act. Apparently he can.
The best choice, though, was Zendaya as Shani. She was Perfect.
She's really good.
Zendaya was
Yeah,
perfect.
we don't see enough of her in the first part. So again, like you have to see more in the second part to really get her casting, which I think is a good casting. I agree with you. Right, it was Salvador Dali. He was going to be Baron Harkonnen. I remember that now. Yeah. I have to go back and rewatch
Well,
my own video
hello,
on
Dolly.
Doom.
Yes,
Uh,
there was a great documentary on all the behind the scenes stuff on YouTube, but it got taken down. It's a pity because it was this amazing.
Yeah, I rented it
on
on Netflix back when they still did the physical discs. That's how I saw Hodorowski's Dune, the documentary about it.
Yeah, I know what you meant. Yeah.
But speaking of Brian Blessed, and you know, I know we're all fans of Flash Gordon, so Flash Gordon, that counts. It didn't do well in the box office, and people love it to this day, especially that soundtrack. Everybody loves that soundtrack.
Flash. Doom, doom.
Okay, so I think it's your turn. You have to name a movie.
Is it? Okay, I'm going to go with Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Oh, why is that not on my list?
You're probably not as big a Pink Floyd fan as I am.
I am a huge Pink Floyd fan.
I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan, I promise you. You see in my bridge, I have that wall art, which is the movie poster from the. It's actually not the. It's the marching hammers from the wall.
Right.
I've been a Pink Floyd fan for years, but all right, you're a Pink Floyd fan as well. I will. That's up.
You've probably been a Pink Floyd fan for longer, but that's only because you're older.
Much older, substantially older.
That's being nice.
One, not only is it a rock opera. We're all friends here. Did you ever see the SNL bit where the two Weezer fans at the Christmas dinner party?
Oh yeah, yes, I have. That's really good.
One of the funniest things I think they ever did. Weezer never started. I'm sorry, no, this whole like fanboy thing got me started. But moving on to my point, The Wall, not only is it a rock opera to Pink Floyd, and rock operas, there were so few of them, the fact that you made a rock opera makes it in and of itself a cult film. Pink Floyd music, how can you go wrong? And the fact that how they were able to reconcile it, it's one, loosely based on the life of Roger Waters, and at the same time, about a new wave fascist taking control of the British state. Wowzers. The film has everything. And it's like every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. I was just the other night, I was having a few beers, I got nostalgic, and I played When the Tigers Broke Free, and I actually had tears in my eyes when I was watching it. It's an amazing film. And again, its biggest problem was poor marketing. In fact, one of the commercials I remember seeing for it when I was like 12 made it look like a cartoon film. So I thought, oh, it's like another Wizards. There are cartoon elements in it, but that's not the whole movie. But I think a lot of people bailed because they thought it was going to be like a long cartoon.
Right.
But did not do well in the States, but absolutely amazing film. If for no other reason, then it's 95 minutes of Pink Floyd music. I mean, I would have gone to see it anyway. Again, when it came out, I was a little too young to see it. I didn't discover it until I was high school taking musical appreciation. And they said, "You haven't seen Pink Floyd's The Wall?" And I'm no, I haven't. And then I saw it, was like so yeah, that's my latest pick.
No, that's a great one. And I also saw The Wall when I was probably way too young to see it. Thanks to somebody who's actually in the comments right now. You know who you are. And yeah, it was transformative. Like to this day, when I think about things like mental illness, like that movie always comes to mind because that movie does a very good portrayal of mental illness, of just like unraveling. Because that's when you hear Roger Waters talk about what The Wall was supposed to mean, he says it's about getting so far lost in yourself and in your experience that you become the thing most terrible to you. And in the end, Pink, the main character, winds up judging himself for what he has become, and he doesn't know if he can forgive himself or not. And that's kind of like what the point of The Wall is. And I find that fascinating that he was able to make a movie or like a rock opera that was basically based on himself, but was about the worst parts of himself and how to combat them. And what if he had completely unraveled and fell apart? It's a great movie. And Bob Geldof will always be Pink in my book. Everything else he did, even I know he did Live Aid. He's done a lot of great things for the world, but to me, he's always the guy from Pink Floyd The Wall.
Period.
Yeah.
He will always be Pink.
Yes. Yeah, I also saw Roger Waters in concert in the 90s. I don't remember it though, for reasons.
Reasons.
Yeah, Patrick Stewart. He was doing a lot of Shakespeare and a lot of like theatrical productions like I, Claudius and things like that before Dune. And that was basically his career before he started hitting the mainstream in the 80s. And by the time he was cast as, Captain Picard, he was kind of just a little known character actor. Like he wasn't that well known. He was known in Shakespeare circles because he apparently did a really good Shakespeare. And I've seen him in some of the BBC Shakespeares, which I have back there. And he was really, really good. Don't get me wrong. But he wasn't well known outside of that. So, yeah. That's why when they were casting and they casted Patrick Stewart, it was disappointing to them that they got Patrick Stewart, this guy nobody had really heard of.
He did a fine job as Gurley Halleck. He doesn't really look like Gurley Halleck, but I thought he gave it a very convincing performance with a lot of energy. All I see is a Hakonan animal.
How can you not like him, like leading his troops into battle, holding a rifle in one hand and a pug in the other? It's great.
Duke Leoto!
Yeah. And you're right. He's also in Excalibur. Good point.
Oh yeah, he plays Arthur's father-in-law.
Right.
Don't tell me, Leon deGrasse.
I think that's right. I didn't know that he once played Lennon, but he definitely looks the part. I could see it. Life Force, fantastic.
Love it. Isn't Patrick Stewart in Life Force too?
He is, yes. He, like I said, he was a character actor. Yeah. He was just one of those actors you would recognize, but not necessarily know from what, like in the 80s.
Sean Innes asked for other films starring Jenny Wright. Off the top of my head, the only other film I can think of that stars Jenny Wright in it is a cult vampire film, which is also on this list, called Near Dark with Bill Paxton and Lance Henriksen.
Yep.
And she's actually a really good actress in it, which is funny because she's completely underutilized. Well, I can't say completely underutilized, but her acting ability is not utilized in The Wall. But she does a fine job acting in Near Dark.
Oh, I see that Lance has gone into the comments. Sorry your internet connection was bugging you, but glad you're still here.
Glad you're still with us, Lance.
Yeah, he's saying it was phone issues. We figured. Like I said, we understand. We definitely understand. I am still amazed. I'm still amazed that I haven't had any of those major technical issues on these live streams in the last few months. Like, it's been a long run without too many issues. Fingers crossed. Jenny Wright was also in The World According to Garp. I guess that also would count as a cult classic.
Definitely. And I completely forgot that. Yeah, she's the girl with the...
Right.
Good catch.
That is a good catch. I would never have thought of that. Sorry, I'm distracted by the comments.
Well, I'm trying to read along with you, so I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
The Near Dark, it's bugging me because I mentioned it in one of my videos not too long ago, and I don't remember why. I even put a clip of it in my movie or my video, and I don't remember why.
Were you talking about Bill Paxton?
Yeah, the Bill. I must have been talking about Bill Paxton, but I can't remember. Like, I didn't do a video on aliens yet, so it couldn't have been that.
Terminator?
Talking about Bill Paxton. No, haven't done Terminator yet either.
Well, the funny thing about Bill Paxton is he's the only person who's been in a Terminator movie, a Predator movie, and what's the third? Thank you. Yes,
he was killed by all three. Yeah.
Killed by all three. Yes, very good. So that's his little claim to fame. He was also in a small part in Independence Day, which I would love to talk about someday. Movie so has its pros and cons. My thing, I always tell people, I would love to re-edit it. I would love to sit down and turn Independence Day into a good movie. With a little tweak here, a little clip there. I mean, it was all there. It was all there. Just the execution, something went terribly awry.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin.
Terminator, Predator, and Alien.
Would be a whole episode in and of itself. And when I left the theater, when I saw Independence Day, I hated it. I really, legitimately, viscerally hated it. Now as I'm older, I kind of appreciate it for what it was. But there's still things about it that bug the crap out of me.
Me too. Like I said, I would love to re-edit it.
Yeah.
But if you can look at it clinically, it's basically a modern remake of War of the Worlds. So if you look at it like that. One thing I didn't bother with the sequel. I heard if you hated the first one, the sequel is a crime against humanity. So the sequel's
bad. Like, it's not even fun in that Roland Emmerich turn your brain off way. It's just bad. It's just a bad movie.
You know what the biggest criticism to Independence Day was, though? They gave Randy Quaid 3 last lines. You don't get 3 last lines. You have one really good last line and you stand by it. Otherwise, it's like peeling off a Band-Aid really slowly. It's like the most climactic scene of the entire movie, and he's giving us one-liners, and I'm like, will you just leave already? It's coming awkward.
Paxton was great in Big Love. There was a lot of really good actors in Big Love, and I think Bill Paxton managed to stand toe to toe with all of them. He did a great job in that show. That was a very, very good show. I was sad when it ended. War of the Worlds was a trope long before the 80s. It was a trope by the end of the 50s. And you're right. It is hard to make any kind of alien invasion story and not at least reference War of the Worlds somehow, visually or thematically. Because, it's H.G. Wells. Like, H.G. Wells was just, he was able to, I like it. H.G. Wells, he has a few stories that are all like seminal works of science fiction that became like whole subgenres. Like, he invented the time travel story, and it pretty much hasn't changed. It's gotten a little worse, actually. We talked about that, I think, on this channel. The Island of Dr. Moreau, the mad scientist on a deserted island playing with genetics.
Mad scientist.
He invented the mad scientist. I mean, come on. Well, no, he didn't invent the mad scientist. That was Mary Shelley. But still, like, when you look at H.G. Wells' body of work, like, it was just amazing that he was able to invent so many different subgenres of science fiction. And he's got others too, like Food of the Gods, which would count as a cult classic movie. And what was the other one? First Men on the Moon. He and Jules Verne were the first people to start talking about people going to the moon. And they both had very different ways of going about it. Because Jules Verne wanted to try to be a little scientifically accurate, whereas H.G. Wells didn't really care about scientific accuracy that much, even though he was probably more well-versed in science than Jules Verne was. He knew that one of your things that you say a lot, I don't remember who you're quoting, but that science fiction isn't for scientists any more than a ghost story is for a ghost. I love that. And I think H.G. Wells kind of understood that. Yeah. Brian Aldiss, thank you. I don't know what we're talking about here, Zuper. Oh, I think we're talking about Life Force. That makes sense.
I should hope. Oh yeah, Matilda May.
May, yeah.
She was hot.
How can you forget?
She really
Matilda
was.
May? I'll never forget her.
She reminded me of Alyssa Milano, or Alyssa Milano reminded me of Matilda May.
Right.
Whichever one you want to compare the other two, but.
Yeah, we mentioned War of the Worlds and we mentioned Buckaroo Banzai, but we forgot to mention that Buckaroo Banzai kind of retcons the entire Orson Welles and War of the Worlds thing, saying that it really did happen.
Yeah, that's the
which
premise.
I thought was fun. Yeah. Godzilla, the Night of the Iguana. Oh, you're talking about the Roland Emmerich, Dean Devlin version. As Thrash himself likes to point out, it's better thought of as a remake of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms than a Godzilla movie. Just makes more sense that way.
Definitely. If they'd called it Big Iguana Eats New York, I would have loved it.
We don't have to talk about that again.
Jean Reno stole the movie. I thought Jean Reno was amazing.
Absolutely.
He alone was worth watching the movie.
I got some more on my list, so let's go ahead. Let's talk about... Which one do I pick? I'm going to pick Sleepaway Camp. A slasher movie that didn't do well at its time, but has kind of gained notoriety more recently because it's seen as transphobic. Because, spoiler alert, the slasher is actually the girl. We've seen the entire movie, but she's not a girl. She's a boy who was raised as a girl. It's a whole thing. But like what I recently learned and kind of fascinates the hell out of me is this movie is considered an iconic piece of cinema in the trans community. Like they love this movie, and I don't know why. I don't get it. It's just so weird to me.
Okay.
It's a really cheesy, goofy slasher movie from the 80s. It just happens to have that twist ending, that really memorable, sticks in your brain forever twist ending. I like it more for its slasher elements, like the whole dipping the guy in the pot of boiling water and stuff like that. I love a good 80s slasher movie. I'm just a sucker for that kind of thing. So Sleepaway Camp, it's always been on my radar. I saw it in the 80s and I've always loved it. Devoid of all the modern day politics around it. But yeah, I just had to bring that up because I just find it so fascinating how it's being viewed by certain people in the LGBTQ community.
Which again, make it a cult film.
Exactly.
I mean, that was one of the things. All the 80s slasher films had to have a certain number of things in common. They had to have a gratuitous amount of violence. People had to be killed and in really different and creative ways. There had to be a lot of premarital sex, usually with people dancing around consent age.
Yeah.
But the big thing is they always had to have a twist ending. And that's the problem. It's okay to create a story which has a twist ending, but when you set out and say, this has to have a twist, you usually set yourself up to fail. See under M. Night Shyamalan.
I was about to mention M. Night Shyamalan.
Endings have to be organic. You can't just say, I want my ending to be like this. And now, one of the best twists in Trilogy of Terror, a movie where the Karen Black is a woman who is in a movie with 3 stories and plays 4 parts. And guess what? Spoiler alert. One of the best twists in there is when you find out she's her own twin sister. I thought that was slick, and I think that's what they were going for with Sleepaway Camp. I think they said we need a twist ending. I know. Let's rip off Trilogy of Terror. Only instead of twin sister, have it be a brother, and that'll be slick. Well, it's certainly original. You got to give them that much. It's also an homage to Psycho, where.
For sure.
Another spoiler. Yeah, exactly. And I don't even have to spoil that one. We should do it at this point.
It's like the most famous movie spoiler in history.
Seriously. So, but I myself, it's not so much whether or not that it worked, but that it was very original. And I think that's why it remains sort of the echoes of that reveal are going to this day.
Okay, I'll buy that. Yeah.
Oh, you like that? Yeah.
Was
Yes,
that one
they
with
were
Mark
always
Hamill? You talking about the
they
Guyver?
were always teenagers. But,
Oh yeah, they were always teenagers, whether or not they were legal.
yeah. Yeah. It's ambiguous. The funny thing is, back in the 80s, the films didn't pretty much care. Nowadays, that they always have to make it sound like if they're sexually active, they always find some way where they mention that their age is over 18. Back in the 80s, hey, young people do what young people do, and but again, that irresponsible behavior has sort of fallen out of favor. In this
Well,
section.
I also think like since the 80s, the average age of an actor playing a teenager has started to go down, so it's closer to being actual teenagers. Because you go back to like the 50s and 60s, teenagers in movies were like 29, 35. Yeah,
They were seeing airlines.
Steve McQueen was a teenager. Really? You're gonna tell me Steve McQueen was a teenager in The Blob? So I think that might have something to do with the changing attitude, is that we're actually seeing young people play young people now. So it gets a little trickier.
Tricky doesn't touch it. It's we're getting to legal issues here.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. So yes, I'm sure you're right. Yes.
Yeah, I think you just missed the boat on that one, Sean Ennis. Like people my age freaking love slashers. Like there's only a few people I've met in my life who are around my age who don't like slashers, especially the 80s slashers, the classics, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, even Child's Play. They all count. And Thrash, he's always plugged in. Pieces.
Oh, Pieces. My wife, Mrs. Thrash, that was her favorite cult. We were talking about this earlier. She loved Pieces. Which of course talk about a twisted ending, more like. And the funny thing is, that was an Italian production company, but they filmed it in the Boston area because they wanted it to play better in American audiences. That's the whole reason why it was filmed in Massachusetts. But I thought it worked.
I've never heard of Fraternity Vacation.
Ooh, I have.
Well, your says everything.
It's not very good. Its biggest claim to fame, and I'm so sorry, I can't remember the actor's name off the top of my head. He played evil in
Fright Night.
Fright Night. He plays the hero in this film, and it literally is just what it sounds like. It was meant to be a college sex romp in the idea of Revenge of the Nerds, but set in the Vacation series. They go on a road trip to Florida for the purposes of doing really unsanitary things. So it's sort of a collaboration between the two. But the two it wasn't good. You know where I think I saw it? I think I saw it on USA Up All Night with Gilbert Gottfried. He's right. Indy, you're so right. I can't believe neither one of us have mentioned Heathers.
That should definitely be on. Yeah, I think it is on my list, actually. I haven't gotten around to it. But yeah, that's a seminal cult classic from the 80s. Along with Time Bandits, also a good one.
Time Bandits. I loved Time Bandits. It was supposed to have a sequel, but never materialized.
Again, because of financial issues. And Terry Gilliam has that like Guillermo del Toro problem that he starts more movies than he actually winds up making. He starts like a dozen movies for every one he actually finishes. And yeah, since we're talking about Christian Slater movies, pump up the volume. Yeah. Take cover, Arizona. I love that movie.
Legend of Billie Jean.
Right. That was the movie Pump Up the Volume that that introduced me to Leonard Cohen, actually. I think a lot of people learned about Leonard Cohen through that movie. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up I think Thrash is having some connection issues, and I have to go eat or do something because I'm tired. But this has been a lot of fun. I'm glad to see people in the comments having fellowship. Don't forget to hit that like, do it now. And maybe we'll continue this. Maybe we'll continue this conversation in a couple weeks, because we could talk about cult movies all day long. Honestly, my list is so long.
Can I plug my show, by the way?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
For those of you free tonight, 7:30 tonight on my content channel, I'm doing a live show. It's Thrash of July. It's going to be a genuine. It's going to be genuine. It's going to be a general Q&A. I have a trivia game all lined up. Bring your own topic. Probably end up talking a lot about cult films now that I'm in the zone. But please, people, join us.
Yes, and that's Eastern time, 7:30 Eastern time. That's 6:30 my time, because I'm in the Central. Sorry. And if you haven't checked it out yet, check out my video on Colossus. It is doing gangbusters on YouTube. For me, like, it's seeing numbers that I don't see very often. So I'm very happy with that. And next week, I should have a video on The Rocketeer. It may or may not have a collaboration in it. It all depends on whether my collaborator can get it done in time. He's a very busy man. And let's see, do I have anything else coming down the pike that I need to talk about? I will start the Twilight Zone reviews really soon. I've started working on my first episode, but I'm not sure. Like, I've been procrastinating a lot, so it's hard to know. But it will happen. I promise. And yeah, check out my community page, because I've been putting a lot of little trivia questions every day, trying to like build some engagement. So yeah, see if you can guess all the answers. I try not to make them too hard. I could make them very hard, but I try not to. Yes, and also at 4:30 Eastern, at the From Here to Paternity YouTube channel, which has like, I don't know, 5 subscribers, we will have a little pre-show before me and the guys talk about, or we and the guys record a podcast, From Here to Paternity. And before we start recording the podcast, we do this little half an hour just shooting the crap kind of thing, and we put it on YouTube just for fun. You can watch that too, but be warned, it's explicit, very explicit. We earned that label. It will never be monetized. So yeah, if you're free, come check that out too. And yes, Scott and Uncle Joe, they're on the show along with Damien. So yeah, until next time, whenever you see us again, good day, and never be ashamed of what you love, as long as you're not hurting anybody.